Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and we're here for a session all about measuring your Dynamics infrastructure and readiness for digital transformation. Our speakers today are Pablo Saez and Chris Lavelle. It's great to have them with us. And as we get started, I just want to note that we do welcome questions, and feel free to enter yours at any point. You can use the Q&A block you should see to the right of the main presentation area. And you can ask those at any point. As I said, the presenters, Pablo and Chris, will be leaving time at the end of their presentation to answer all of your questions. We are also recording today's event, and we'll be making that available at a later time. So without any further delay, I am going to hand things off to Pablo to get things started. Pablo, welcome.
Hi, welcome everybody, and so glad you could join us today. As we cover through the topic, one of the things that I wanted to do was just kind of talk about where Dynamics is today. And as you assess the Dynamics implementations that are out in the world, most of them are housed actually on premises, right? So one of the things that you look at is with support, a lot of this support that has occurred is really focused on on-premise implementations. And with some customers really climbing the cloud adoption curve, right? So starting to put some of the components around their implementations in the cloud. And one of the things that we do here at TriBridge, if you don't know TriBridge, we have the largest base of Dynamics customers in North America, and we've been supporting Dynamics for over 15 years, along with other platforms like SharePoint, BI, infrastructure, et cetera. So, with that experience, we have really seen it all. And what we find on premises is that you have very highly adaptable platforms, and those platforms are adaptable because of the amount of integrations and customizations that need to occur to be able to manage your business processes using Dynamics. And part of the on-premises implementation, the reason why it's so great for integrations and customizations is because you have full control of that environment, right? But then that full control comes at specific costs. And as I look at customers that are taking this move into the cloud, one of the things that I see is that many of these customers define reactive SLAs. And when I say a reactive SLA, what I'm really talking about is a customer that if there is a failure, at that point they react, and their staff becomes hero because they're able to go through and manage that. Now compare that with a company that actually provides some level of cloud services, and if you think about their processes are based on providing IT out as a service to you, right? So one of the things that happens in that case is their SLAs are proactive, and what that means in the case of a implementation of a cloud is that those SLAs are well defined ahead of a customer signing on to that contract. Those SLAs define availability, recoverability, how much data is going to be at question if there is some kind of failure. Again, comparing that with many of the on-premises implementations that we see where the SLAs are reactive because you have a backup that you've never really actually executed and tried to see how long that takes. We do see quite a bit of cloud within the Dynamics world as a secondary platform, and what that means is sometimes some of the areas of, let's say, providing some information, some portal, for example, for their partners on the internet, right? So being able to put information out like that. And we also see it a lot for test systems and development systems. So that's kind of where Dynamics is today. In summary, mostly on-premise with some movement into the cloud. So what are the challenges in this type of environment? And as you look at the Dynamics customers across the board, certain themes start to come out as far as the challenges that they have. And those themes kind of fall in these different categories I've put in this slide. So things around security and risk. When you think about Dynamics and you think of all of the components within a Dynamics environment, it is just part of a diversity of workloads that run on premises. So you have maybe a Dynamics or ERP implementation, CRM implementation, but then you also probably on that same network you're running file servers. You have other types of workloads like email or even document management and sharing. And when you think about all of the components that you have within an on-premises environment, what you have is you have a lot of area where folks can create attack vectors into your network. Now, when you think about Dynamics in the cloud, most cloud providers that are offering Dynamics in a cloud environment, what they have done is they have isolated those functionalities of Dynamics into, in essence, a pod, so it's a much more secure environment, even though some people would think, oh, it's in the cloud, it's not as secure. Our findings is that there's more security involved in cloud implementations that you could do than you can do on premises. And one of the things to just, that's kind of happening today, right, is within an on-premises network, having machines like Windows XP or Windows Server 2003 that are no longer patched, and all of a sudden they become attack vectors. So security and risk implications are pretty high. There's also complex integration, and as you probably have in your Dynamics environment, there's a certain amount of third-party components or custom code that needs to be integrated into your environment. And some of those could already be cloud services. So many people that are running on premises, they leverage services like ADP or Salesforce or things like Office 365, and there's probably already some level of integration that has occurred within that cloud environment. The difference, though, is when you think about each on-premises implementation, what you're basically doing is you're creating a one-off hybrid implementation between these cloud providers and your on-premises environment. And that causes a necessary alignment between the infrastructure and the application groups to be able to work together to create these complex integrations. Most customers that I have talked to, as I do these cloud strategy assessments for TriBridge, where we go in and we evaluate where they are for a roadmap from a cloud perspective. So many of the customers that I have talked to, one of the biggest challenges they have, especially if they're running something like a Dynamics GP, is remote access, right? So to be able to access a Dynamics environment, you have to VPN in or you have to go into the office. And this expands beyond just Dynamics, things like file servers. If I need to access something, I need to go into the office or I need to set up a VPN to access those types of files. So there's a lot of challenge just in being able to do remote access and accessing your data when you're on the road or you're working from a home office. And then finally, around availability. Many times people start to look at a digital transformation when some kind of compelling event has occurred. For example, their Dynamics environment went down because there was not enough monitoring, let's say, around the SQL database to understand that there was a restriction on that, which might not be the case in your specific environment, but we have come across folks that are looking at cloud only because they want the level of high availability available there. Only a handful of customers that I've talked to have said our Dynamics system can be down for 2 or 3 days. It's not a big problem. We don't have to worry about it, right? That typically does not happen, and high availability is a challenge as we look at Dynamics. So what are your options? What is it that you need to be able to do as you look through the transformation for Dynamics? Well, there are multiple levels of implementations of Dynamics, and that could include on-premises, like we've been talking about. And within on-premises, there's really 2 flavors to that. One of them is you have physical servers, which I start to see less and less of these days. Most folks have actually virtualized within their own specific data center, so we see it on-premise and virtualized. And many times you also see, even though it's not on-premises, you might see it co-located in a partner's data center, but really what that partner is providing is the old traditional ping, power, and pipe, right? They're giving you an environment to place your servers, whether they're physical or virtual, and you have to manage that full stack. The beauty of the on-premises or the co-located is, again, from a implementation perspective for customizations and integrations, there's a lot of flexibility there. But then think about the SLAs again and disaster recovery and business continuity that you need to be able to create yourself for these. Another option is what's called virtual private cloud. And in virtual private cloud, a provider has defined a set of services that they're going to give you, and that includes who manages that environment, what that help desk looks like, and how you open up trouble tickets, and then what a lot of folks focus on, the service level agreements associated with what that virtual private cloud provider is giving you. The nice thing in the virtual private cloud environment is that you have now the flexibility to implement your Dynamics environment and also bring in some ancillary services with that environment in place. In other words, if you have a specific ISV or an integration that you're using, you're able to stand up a server. So a really simple example would be to set up a SQL Server reporting services server within that pod environment where Dynamics is living to be able to go through and generate reporting. As you look at the third option here, which is public cloud, and really what I'm referring to in public cloud are services like Azure and Amazon Web Services. One of the things that you can do is, of course, you can move your servers into that environment. It's going to be similar to virtual private cloud, except for the fact that, number one, you have to design around the network of that public cloud. So you need to understand all of the networking components of putting your servers into that public cloud environment. The other part that you need to be able to do is define what that storage model is going to look like, and then what the replication of that storage is going to look like. So there's a lot of work that, for example, virtual private cloud, the provider has determined for you already, whereas in public cloud, again, you have building blocks that you're building to implement that environment. And a lot of times you have to take in consideration things like compliance and regulatory pressures to try to figure out whether public cloud is even an option for you. And then finally, you have the SaaS model. And really the SaaS model is what I would call the cloud native model. It's where you have defined a Dynamics environment, in the case of Dynamics, that is actually purchased typically through some kind of subscription for a user, and that subscription is pretty much the offering. You're not putting servers into a cloud. What you're doing there is you're leveraging and provisioning users, and those systems are automatically created when you buy that subscription. In the SaaS model, it's really the end point of where we're headed with cloud computing. The unfortunate part today is some systems, and again, using Dynamics as an example, they're actually not prepared to be able to leverage platform as a service in the cloud to create a cloud native environment. So for example, if I take, again, not to pick on Dynamics GP, but let's take Dynamics GP as an example, you cannot use Azure SQL database as the back end for it, right? You can't use the native SQL implementation in the cloud for that. But when you look at Dynamics 365, right, if I look at Dynamics 365 for business in the financial suite, they actually have taken NAV and they've put NAV into the cloud, and they're actually using Azure as the back-end repository for that. But that implementation is only available if you buy it through the SaaS model. So what are some of the considerations as you look at those four options? How do you determine what is the best approach for you to be able to move into this area? And I will tell you, I'm going to just start to pick some of these items that are here on the slide. So if you look at customization requirements and ISV and app parity, right? What is it that your business does, and how does it do it? So if you need to, for example, have a ERP system that is going to be tracking your inventory, and you need to have a different set of methods of tracking your inventory. So FIFO, first in, first out, and maybe some of the other types of inventory management components. You start to compare that with what is offered today. So if I go on premises, and I'm going to use NAV to pick on a different Dynamics environment here. If I take NAV, for example, on premises, it is a very full-featured set of inventory management components. But if I look at Dynamics 365 for financials, some of those components, for example, on inventory, you can only do first in, first out inventory, right? It's the only module that exists. And what you have to understand is, as you're looking at these cloud migrations or looking at a transformation into the cloud, you need to be able to evaluate whether or not the cloud version, the virtual private cloud version, or the on-premises version is the one that would be best suited for your specific requirements. But it goes beyond that, right? So one of the nice things in virtual private cloud, for example, is the ability for the virtual private cloud provider to give you and already create event management within your application. What that means is they have instrumented that application to, for example, capture metrics on SQL Server, so you understand when you would need to add additional storage because you're adding lots of external documents within your environment, right? Those are things that if you're on premises, you have to build yourself. If you're in a virtual private cloud environment or in a software as a service environment, typically those things are already built in for you. I've been saying, a lot of things around, well, cloud could be limited from a software as a service perspective, and you have to look at the application parity. But then for some companies, it makes a lot of sense to go cloud. I've worked with multiple startups where they don't have a legacy financial system that they're trying to implement. They're probably tracking, their current financials on spreadsheets or maybe on QuickBooks. So when you look at, in their case, time to market would be the most important component. They want to be able to get through implementing their core operational systems, and looking at a SaaS solution probably makes most sense there. Another component around here is around help desk. So, how do you integrate your help desk along with the help desk of the cloud provider? And do they have the ability for you to be able to escalate calls if you have that component? So you can start to see that there are a lot of different considerations that you need to look at. If you're going on premises, business continuity becomes something that is key. I have talked to so many customers where they might have failover and disaster recovery defined, but they've never practiced it. They've never tried to see whether or not in their on-premises environment they could actually fail over, or even fail over to a separate set of servers, or in the worst case, actually bring up a set of servers, whether virtual or physical, to be able to run their environment. Versus when you buy a service through virtual private cloud or through SaaS, some of that business continuity components are already built into the service. So when you look at those considerations, what you want to be able to do is you want to have a methodology, right? You want to have an execution strategy on how do I go through and I make these evaluations. And I have done dozens and dozens of these types of cloud strategy assessments, where the first thing you really have to do is you really have to figure out, where do I want to go from a business perspective, right? Let's look at our current state. Let's document what that current state looks like. Let's try to understand what the dependencies of the different business units are and how they're leveraging that. And then let's look and see what our business requirements, how can that drive what the future state would look like. And in some cases, that future state might actually be a hybrid environment where some things still run on premises and some things run in the cloud, or it could be that it moves completely into the cloud at this point. It's really a matter of trying to determine a point in time when you can create a roadmap to say, this is what this migration looks like. And how does that migration, how do you do the evaluation to see what that migration might actually look like? Well, there's a few items that you have to assess. And when you assess those items, first of all, you have to enumerate what are all of the different workloads that you have. So what is a workload? Well, things like email is a workload, document management is a workload, your financial system is a workload. You can go into more specifics, right, into an application. So what is it that is driving your business workflows today? Might be an application or a platform like SharePoint that you are trying to determine, will this actually work, and how much do I need to consume in the cloud to be able to run these types of business processes within that environment. You can create and put in agents to actually generate a performance baseline. So think about it. If you're running on a server, whether it's physical or virtual within your environment, and that server is only used 10%, you might be able to actually leverage other workloads within that. So part of that assessment is really trying to come up with a baseline for performance. What is it? What percentage of resources do I need? Think of storage, right, for backups, right? You need to understand how much storage would you need to be able to have in the cloud environment, especially under virtual private cloud or in public cloud, to be able to allocate the correct number of storage, including the business continuity and replication that you will need to put in play for, let's say, a geographical failover between two data centers. And then finally, you need to look at the dependencies of this architecture. And when you look at the mapping of that architecture, it's across many things. So for example, let's start with dynamics, to put that stake in the ground. Okay, so we have the dynamics with the databases. Now we need to do reporting. Where's that reporting occurring? What kind of services do you need for that reporting? What is the authentication and identity that you would need to be able to take a person and be able to authenticate and access that service and run it. So part of the architecture is understanding what those dependencies and constraints are within that. And then once you have all of that information, you really start to work with the transformation. So it's really the migration, and because you have done such a great job with your envisioning, you know exactly how you want to move those applications and workloads into the cloud, and because you've done the assessment, you know exactly which types of resources you need. In addition to just the physical running of those services, you also need to be able to get your help desk up to speed, right? Because now you're adding in new types of platforms that perhaps in your on-premises environment you never had to deal with. So things like, for example, Azure Active Directory Connect, where there is a connection between the cloud identities and your Active Directory that is running on premises. So I was at a Microsoft, I actually presented at a Microsoft event around digital transformation, and I kind of took this slide from that presentation. And it was interesting because what Microsoft was talking, they actually did the first part of the presentation. What they were actually talking about was, well, what does a partner of the future look like, right? So when you go out to look for a partner, what is it that you need to find as we start to do these transformations into the cloud? And from Microsoft's perspective, the Dynamics partner of the future, what needs to occur there is a partner that can actually work through all of the different areas that IT provide services to the customer. So everything from telephony, meaning do I need to integrate voice over IP into the CRM system, right? So and sometimes call control and the rest into CRM becomes necessary, or being able to do outgoing calls or being able to route incoming calls. They might tie into CRM, ERP. You might need to be able to do document management from an external partner perspective. So, you know, we have this Dynamics environment, but now we want, anytime that something is added as a sales order, our contract says we're going to, let's say, drop some documents inside of a OneDrive for Business or a Dropbox. We want to be able to go through and have a partner that understands what are the options that are out there around that. And I'm not going to go through all of the different areas, but, you know, Office 365 is one that's pretty prevalent. How do you tie it into your email system, into SharePoint, into Skype, and some of the other offerings around Office 365? So when they summarized it, what they said, you know, the partner of the future has a depth of understanding around these different areas, but they have a breadth of areas that they cover. And they lead with the cloud. They're always understanding that the cloud is what's coming into the future, and they offer a comprehensive solution around that. They work with the customer from a business consulting perspective to be able to create both a business and a technology strategy, and from a business perspective, be able to understand what are the integrations and validate those integrations within that environment. So when I think about this, you start to think, wow, you know, it's not so much a partner that you're looking that understands the depth of, let's say, GP or NAV or AX or CRM, right, to go through some of those. It's really about a partner that can expand across those and understand what those integration points are, and understands what a cloud environment looks like and what are the benefits of being able to move into the cloud. So as I start to go through that, you know, one of the things that you look at is, you know, what is IT as a service? And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris so he can start to go through the what this partner does from an IT as a service perspective.
Great. Well, thank you, Pablo. So I'm actually going to start with what it's not, right? So it's not a cloud service model, such as infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. It's not vendor only in the sense that you know, it's only be provided through vendors. You know, internal IT can deliver IT as a service solutions to customers. What it is an operational model, and it's an operational model of how you package and deliver services for consumption. Deliver package service for consumption, and in a way where the business needs become the driver for the IT component, and it's focused on the needs and outcomes of the business versus, you know, constraints within IT or other areas. So, and there's some traits that we typically see as part of this. One of them is pretty much an inclusive cost model that can be either per user, per instance, or per consumption. Dynamic, on-demand, typically delivered through cloud services. And it has the tendency to remove the burden of providing a standardized service from IT so that they can focus on strategic initiatives that drive the business forward. So how does it help, and how does it relate to ERP? So, you know, it really allows you the ability to deliver the right size and capacity of IT, provides financial transparency to the organization as part of that, and it allows for standardization and enhanced business agility through the delivery of IT as a service. So through those mechanisms, this allows for reduced capital expenses and provides some enhancements to some of the ERP integrations and potentially to things like DR that may be relevant. So let's talk about some of the typical components that might be delivered as IT as a service that relate to ERP. So one of those items I think that becomes very relevant as you move or look to move ERP into the cloud is the evaluation of desktop as a service. So quite often when ERP is moved to the cloud, a remote desktop or remote application type scenario is used to provide access to the non-web interfaces that are sometimes required. And an alternative to that is to implement a true desktop as a service solution where you're providing a full individual Windows session to those users to provide a full rich experience to them, the same as if they were working from their desktop. And there's some good efficiencies with that and benefits of that. So one, it creates a uniform experience for accessing that ERP system and any other applications required by the end user, regardless of the device they're on. So it takes away that dependency of having things loaded local and worrying about which device you're on at any given moment, and providing the right interface based on what device you have with you. It has the opportunity to enable or accelerate a BYOD or bring your own device initiative within your organization to reduce some of the capital costs associated with managing, and operating costs associated with deploying, managing, maintaining the desktops and laptops for end users. And then another critical aspect is that it provides an opportunity to enhance your existing DR. As you move ERP into the cloud and take advantage of the opportunities to have a rich, robust DR built in as part of the ERP cloud solution, moving your desktop into the cloud now removes that final dependency, so that if an event or situation causes your end users to not have access to their normal devices, it's no longer a limitation. Any device that can connect to the internet and open up a browser now becomes their desktop, and they have full access to the full ERP and other systems that may be complementary to that in the event of a disaster. So it becomes another component of a high available service. So another opportunity where IT as a service solution can be implemented is with Office 365. So as you implement your ERP and look at Office 365, there's integration aspects with Outlook from an invoicing perspective, integration with SharePoint and OneDrive for workflow, document management, and enablement of communication both within your organization and external to your organization. Another component as we look at this is the opportunity to reduce the capital costs associated with rolling out ERP and the IT spend. The nature of IT as a service allows us to deliver just the right amount, whatever that may be, and not have to worry about buying ahead or planning ahead from a staffing perspective or team member availability perspective, because everything needed to consume the service and to achieve the business outcome is typically wrapped in the IT service being delivered. You can buy it as needed, and the scale of the organization providing the IT as a service can provide efficiencies to your organization, reducing your capital costs. And then finally, again, the ability to simplify that DR recovery and make it a cohesive recovery in the cloud with built-in from the start as core to the solution with deep integration becomes a risk mitigation tool for the organization. So when we talk IT as a service and some of these components, we look at this as a phased approach, right? A phased approach to reach a true digital maturity, where through the process outlined earlier of creating a vision of current state versus future state of the business, assessing the environment to determine what's required to go from current state to future state from a technical perspective and operational perspective, and then assisting in that transformation really has an impact. So in phase one, we're doing things like identifying the business challenges. We're understanding the CIO, the role of the CIO and their vision for the organization from a strategic perspective. In that second aspect of assess, we're really looking at the existing, the agile mindset of the organization, developing that framework of how we're going to transform, and looking at various tools and processes that are in place or that we need to be brought to bear to execute on the transformation. And then finally, as we look at the transform aspect, we're actually implementing those platform changes, the cloud services, and the tools necessary in support of that. So as mentioned, one of the goals of IT as a service, especially in this scenario, is to really drive business outcomes. So an example of a business outcome would be customer loyalty and revenue. So by leveraging the SLA-based relationships, and typically in IT as a service, and understanding what the requirements are and then developing the SLA and around those, we're enhancing that end user experience and really helping them ensure that they can deliver on what's necessary to your end customers to impact the loyalty and revenue they derive. By leveraging performance monitoring to determine the adherence to those SLAs and opportunities for improvement, we're able to react quickly to things that may be impacting the business or impacting the organization in its delivering on the goal of customer loyalty and revenue. And then by focusing on the customer satisfaction and experience, we are, as a measure of the success of that IT as a service component, we're able to continually evaluate and increase productivity for the organization. So again, we look at IT as a service as a business enabler to achieve a business outcome through technical services. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the TriBridge methodology. And if you notice this slide, it maps very closely to the slide of the future, or the partner of the future we had talked about earlier. But this is how TriBridge approaches that. So with TriBridge as the partner and our various customers, we have packaged IP solutions that are built to integrate with the various ERP platforms and our CRM customer systems, our CRM and customer engagement systems, and have created a variety of solutions that really provide added value to the base ERP solution being provided and get the most out of that and have the largest business impact. So as you think about the partner of the future, TriBridge as an organization has mapped to that very well and provides services in line with that. Everything from providing managed services inclusive of support to deep integration of IP and other solutions to having specific capabilities to deeply understand our customer business processes. So at a high level, just to touch base on some of the key aspects of TriBridge as an organization, 750 users with 6-time winner of Microsoft's Dynamics Partner of the Year award, one of the largest Microsoft Dynamics customer bases in North America, the 98% customer retention rate, and a focus across the U.S. and Europe. So also want to touch base on the cloud division of TriBridge, Concerto, which provides the fully managed cloud solutions, whether that be public, private, or hybrid. And one of the things that I think really differentiates us as an organization, as the cloud division of TriBridge, is the application-centric approach that we take, where the focus is on the application that's delivering the business service to the customer to ensure that it's consistently performing at the highest level of security and compliance and delivering the customer value. So with that, I'd like to open it up for Q&A.
Thanks, Chris. We have our first question, and that is from Tracy. And Tracy is asking whether IT as a service, can this be used for a portion of an IT environment, or does this dedicate the company to 100% of their IT being managed by a third party?
So excellent question. It does not require you to dedicate the entirety of the IT to it. The nature of IT as a service lets you pick and choose from the service catalog, which defines what the service is, what the deliverables of that service are, what the expected business outcomes are, the responsibility of the service provider and the consumer. So you can pick a la carte to a large extent for the services that you're looking for. So you may, for example, decide that I want to have my ERP delivered through an IT as a service model leveraging a hybrid cloud, and then I want to offer leverage the desktops to the IT as a service component of desktop as a service to enable my user to have a unified experience that removes the requirement for end user hardware from that equation. But everything else is managed by your internal IT organization. It allows for a phased approach or a solution by service approach, which provides a lot of flexibility and lets you pick what differentiates your organization versus what you may make sense to provide as a service.
Thanks, Chris. And I think you already kind of touched on this, but Chad had asked, what is the relationship between TriBridge and Concerto? I know you briefly alluded to it, but if maybe you can just go a little bit deeper on that.
Sure. So Concerto is a independent, wholly owned subsidiary for TriBridge. We're the cloud brand or cloud division for Concerto is the cloud division for TriBridge. So TriBridge's focus is on business solutions for our customers, and Concerto's focus is on cloud-first technologies and delivering cloud solutions to our partners and customers.
Thanks,
So
Chris.
when TriBridge goes to deploy a solution in the cloud, they leverage us as their cloud organization.
Perfect. The last question I have at the moment, and folks, if you have any more questions, please just type them into the Q&A. We still have a few minutes left in the session, so don't be shy. The last question is from John. Can TriBridge provide a cost-benefit analysis, or CBA, for each Dynamics option, whether it's on-prem, virtual private cloud, public, or a SaaS model like D365?
So Pablo, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I was just unmuting myself here. So absolutely, one of the components that we do as part of a cloud strategy assessment is to go out and do a comparison of your environment and what that would look like across the different cloud options. And we do that based on a series of assumptions, right? So what the approximate cost is of running your Dynamics environment and storage and the rest. But we will be able to compare that both from a virtual private cloud perspective and then also using public cloud options like Azure and AWS. So it is a component and something that we can absolutely provide if you're interested.
Great. Thanks so much, Pablo.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't look like we have any more questions in the queue at this time. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Jason.
Okay, thank you. Well, that is going to conclude today's session. We have recorded it. We'll be making that available. There's also a quick survey that will pop up after you leave today. Please do take 15, 20 seconds to just fill that out and provide any additional feedback. We always appreciate to hear back from you on your experiences at the events. So with that, we will conclude today's event. Have a great day, everybody.